A group of more than 80 different organizations have put together a letter advocating for incoming President Joe Biden to finally cut off support for the war on Yemen that has claimed so many lives. This US-backed assault led by Saudi Arabia and the UAE began back during President Barack Obama's administration when Biden was vice president. But the letter notes that since then, more than a dozen senior Obama administration officials, including Susan Rice, Samantha Power, Ben Rhodes, and Jake Sullivan, have called for an end to US participation in the war. And they say that the Biden-Harris administration has a historic opportunity to end US complicity in this war the moment you come into office. Now, he backed the war when he was vice president, but a lot has changed since then, and the death toll has skyrocketed since then. And as they point out, many former Democrats who were involved in that administration have acknowledged that they were wrong. So hopefully this is an opportunity to rethink America's role in that conflict, Yasmin.
Yeah, this conflict, there really is a lot to it. They call it a Yemeni civil war, which in and of itself is a bit of a misnomer. So whenever you look at any of the individual conflicts going on in the Middle East right now, there's a few common tropes that continuously come up almost every time, right? One of the big ones is the ideological differences between the Sunni Muslims and the Shia Muslims. Then if you take the individual conflicts and you expand further, it always comes down to Saudi Arabia versus Iran. Then if you go out even further, then you get the US versus Russia. And then there's also the UK and Canada and other large Western powers that are there. And it always comes back down to oil. And that's why we're there. That's why we went to the Middle East in the first place. That's why we have such a strong presence there. And if you look at the map of Yemen, the entire northern border is Saudi Arabia, right? So any kind of instability in Yemen is worrisome for Saudi Arabia. There's also some political implications there. They don't want Iran to have too much influence in Yemen because that's too close to them. And ultimately, it threatens the oil supply. That's what it comes down to. So as far as pulling out of the conflict, it's going to be very, very difficult. We made a huge mess over there with the Obama administration. We dropped a lot of bombs. They weren't really targeted bombs, and it contributed to the biggest humanitarian crisis in the entire world right now. I mean, there's starvation, there was a cholera epidemic, and this is all before coronavirus even hit. There's rape going on, there's blockades so people can't get supplies. You have social workers who are just not taking salaries for years at a time because there's no money to pay them, but they still have to do the work. So it really is kind of crazy. As far as pulling out, we absolutely have to. There's no denying the very, very direct link to the lives that we live here in the United States to the catastrophe that's happening over in Yemen. We're directly complicit in all of it, all for oil, so we can live the lifestyle that we live. But as far as pulling out of the entire Middle East, it's all so integrated and convoluted, it's going to be difficult. I'm sure a lot of people want to pull out. I don't know what the path forward is specifically on how to get there. I think a big chunk of it will be energy independence and less dependence specifically on oil. But we'll see how far off that is.
Well, it certainly is complicated and interconnected, but I also think that, theoretically pulling out of literally every conflict that we've unnecessarily gotten ourselves involved in is one thing. Ending some specific elements of our support for the war on Yemen, I think is a simpler situation to solve. Although, as you point out, we have to acknowledge the context of why we're involved in the first place to do that. But really fast, I want to give you a little bit more information. One of our elected representatives who's been pushing for an end to this for a very long time was involved in invocations of the War Powers Act to try to get us out of that is Ro Khanna, who's joined us on the Damage Report to talk about this exact subject multiple times. He tweeted, "Yemen is the world's worst humanitarian catastrophe. Ending any US support for the Saudis' war should be a top priority in the Biden administration." I'm sure he's going to be putting a lot of pressure on them to do exactly that. And by the way, the most updated numbers, this is as of today, during the conflict is 233,000 deaths in Yemen, including 131,000 from indirect causes such as lack of food, health services, and infrastructure. Looking ahead to the next year, as many as 24.3 million people will need some form of humanitarian assistance and protection. And that's with the ongoing conflict. Like, it's not just the disastrous aftermath there's still gonna be a war being waged on these people as they need help with things like continuing cholera outbreaks, food inaccessibility, and things like that. In terms of what can actually be done, we do have suggestions, including coming from Hassan Al-Tayeb, lead Middle East policy lobbyist for the progressive organization Friends Committee on National Legislation, who has also joined us on the Damage Report on multiple different occasions. He said, by executive order, Biden could get the Pentagon to end intelligence sharing for the Saudi coalition airstrikes, end logistical support, and spare parts transfers that keep Saudi warplanes in the air. He could restore humanitarian assistance to northern Yemen. He could use his power as president to put pressure on other nations that are supporting the Saudi coalition, like France, the UK, and Canada, and get them to follow suit. He could have the State Department put a stop on all arms sales to Saudi Arabia unless they meet certain benchmarks. Now that's a lot of different tools, but they're also, everyone seems like common sense, and they're all things that Biden can just do. Like he doesn't need Mitch McConnell to sign on to it or anything like that. He can do these things. A lot of it is diplomatic. Some of it can be done via executive orders, but he can do all of that. And that would do a great deal of the work to save some lives, make it more difficult for Saudi Arabia to continue the way they've been waging war up until this point.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that the US backs Saudi Arabia. We work very closely with them because of their oil. And Saudi Arabia, I don't think they liked Obama very much, but they love Trump. They also love George W. Bush before him. They worked with them to get the oil. And so that's why a lot of times you'll see the US kind of just treating Saudi Arabia very, very delicately, even when we really should not. And the only reason is because we're worried about losing our grip on the oil over there. And just the general instability, and then also, keeping Russia out of the Middle East. There's a lot going on. So it's going to be a mess, but at this point, it's unacceptable how bad it is in Yemen. So something has to happen.
Exactly. And look, if Biden wants to demonstrate that America's changed, that we've moved on from Trump, I mean, this is one of the easiest, most significant ways that he can almost immediately do it on day one. Trump has, he's made these massive arms deals with Saudi Arabia and all of that, loves working with them, even though it's the weirdest thing that his base doesn't seem to have an issue with that, even though they're super suspicious of the Saudis generally. I've never really understood that. But anyway, this would be a great thing that Biden could do. It's one of the many things we'll be watching for as he begins his first term. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.